my name is Sam Slishman. I am an emergency physician, also chief medical officer for Rescue Essentials. And the itch that I'm trying to scratch with this interview and maybe this interview series is whenever I've gone to trade shows before, I've had this feeling that I am sort of an extra. I mean, the attendees are the main focus and the exhibitors are people in a separate hall, almost selling concessions. And I've never really loved that dynamic. I stand there and I have my products and I wait to try to make eye contact with anybody who's walking by. And if I can get just 2 minutes, I'm grateful. And I feel when I see products that are out there, I mean, every product, a pen, a battery, a paperclip, someone went crazy over every single item that exists out there. And there's a story to be told with every item. And so what I would like to do with this type of interview series is give inventors an opportunity to really dig deep into their story. And I thought that this would be a good way to start it because I really like Sam and Cherrie Scheinberg. They've been mentors to me for many, many years now. I met Sam and Cherrie over a traction splint. Gosh, it's got to be 20 something years ago now. And one of the main things that they were helpful for me with was to get it, to basically chop it down. It was a ski pole at one time, and they convinced me to turn it into something that was more EMS oriented. And that was extremely helpful. But beyond that, they've been just great friends and, good people to be around through the years. And so it's been nice. And I will let Sam and Cherrie kind of talk about their product. The IO is, I saw it only once. I saw it at EMS Today back in March, and I thought it was just a very elegant, simple, no batteries device. And I'd love to know more about it.
First of all, I would like to thank you, Cherrie and I both. There she is, my partner for 52 or 3 years. You kind of forget them. Anyway, Sam is right. We've known him for quite a while, and he's extremely intelligent and more important, an extremely kind doctor. And I think in the medical profession and maybe any profession, that's a rare trait. I just say that my background is I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and I've been a physician for over 50 years. And I first, I practiced orthopedics, but in the course of my training, I came up with an idea, had an insight about, and it was a splint, which became the Sam splint. And Sam nailed it when he said these little devices that look so simple. And I remember thinking, geez, how hard could this be? It was just layering a piece of malleable aluminum between two pieces of foam. It's a piece of cake. Wrong. Our company began with the Sam splint, and over the years we've added products. Our main focus is on emergency products, and we use a certain algorithm that has to do with emergency products. And this fits right into it because one of the things we focus on is circulation. And the IO whole concept, I'm not going to go into the history, that's a talk in itself, but the whole idea, it's been out there for over 100 years, and there was some more interest in the very early 1920s, and that interest increased through physiological experiments in the 1930s, and then in World War II gave it a boost, especially in the Blitz in London, because people were trying to start IVs in the dark. And that's very difficult to do, to find a vein in the dark. But it's easier to feel a bone. And so they were using IO in World War II in the sternum mainly because it had really excellent flow and still does. But for various reasons, the interest in IO tapered off. And I know when I started medical school, way back then, in the early 60s, we just didn't deal with it at all. And then eventually when I entered an orthopedic residency, I would get called to put in an intraosseous device when they could not start an IV any other way. And I think the only reason they called us is they figured as an orthopedic surgeon, we would have more access to bone and interest in bone. It really made no sense, but that was my first introduction to it. And then I guess the guys who really get most of the credit, if not all of the credit for the recent interest and use of IOs would be the guys in San Antonio, Texas, and special pats on the back to Larry Miller and Scotty Bolater, and of course there are others there, but two extremely nice and bright men who started the VitaCare company, which produced the Easy IO. And just to give you some understanding, that company started back in 2001, and they finally got approval around 2004. And Larry would be glad to tell any of you, I'm sure, the difficulties he had, the iterations, all the changes that were made in that product before it was a success. And so I think that's the thing to take away if you're interested in product development. Don't beat yourself over the head if it takes time.
Hey,
So
Sam, can I ask a quick question? Is it a
sure.
class 1 device, or how does the FDA? Class 2, so you got to go through more hoops.
Yeah. So that being said, I just bring up the Easy IO because I think it's a very nice product, and they really led the way. It was, I think I could be wrong, but I believe around 2010, and the company was sold to Teleflex, and Teleflex has been marketing that product since. It's a power, I'm sure most of you recognize it because it's been out there now for a very long time. And it's a power driver, has a battery, and it's got a lot of torque and a lot of speed to it. And it's a good product. I have nothing negative to say about it. But it's how our product came about is how so many ideas come about. Some gentleman in Salt Lake City, this Sean Foytek especially, developed a concept and a design and a product for removing uterine polyps. And it looks very much like what we have. And a friend of mine, Dick Clinchy, or Doc Clinchy, who is really a legend on his own in the EMS world, he thought this thing would be of interest to me. And if you know Dick, he's generally right when he makes a statement. And if you want to learn a lot about the EMS world, just buy him a beer and let him talk, because he could tell you so many things. But at the end of the day, he tipped me off to this, and I was at an EMS meeting. I could have been EMS Today or EMS World. I don't really remember. It was maybe 3 or 4 years back, and I was walking around, and in bingo, I saw it was really their first demonstration of their product in our world. And of course, it was very crude, and they had a bone block, and they were drilling into it as best they could. But I said to myself, that's that product that Dick was talking about. And at that point, I gathered all the people at our trade show booth and insisted they come over and take a look at this thing, because in my mind, I already could see the end at the beginning. Believe me, we're not at the end. We're still moving along in that direction, but it was clear to me that this product had a place in our world.
So Sam, can I ask a
Sure.
question about the product that you saw? So have you had to change the molds? Have you had to modify it to any extent, or it looks
Well,
today
yes.
as it did
Well,
that day?
yes, we did. And continue.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a SpaceX. The
Yeah.
first rockets didn't get off the pad super well,
Okay.
and they certainly didn't land where they wanted them to.
So they had the IP, they had the idea, they had
They
something that
did,
would
but
penetrate
for
bone.
a different purpose, really. And
Yeah.
they eventually sold their product to Boston Scientific for use for the uterine polyps, but they got licensed back for other uses. So at that point, really almost exactly at that point, we started negotiating because there was no doubt in my mind what I wanted to do. And so I don't know if you guys can see, I don't know how well this will work, but this is the product we're talking about. It is a manually operated hand drill.
What's it made out of?
And it's, thank you, honey. It is, this will be the way this goes for the rest of the evening.
That's right.
But it's made out of a polycarbonate, and polycarbonate is it's very tough stuff. It's what they use for bulletproof glass, for example. And it can be translucent or it can be solid. That's not really relevant, but it's tough stuff, and it's lightweight. And so if you can see, there's a handle here, and we call this, some people call it a driver, we call it an actuator, but the point is when we squeeze it, this barrel rotates and then rotates back. And every time you squeeze it, it rotates and rotates back. But when it hits something solid, it only goes in one direction, and you can hear that ratcheting sound. So now it's just going in one direction, rotating in one direction. And it has a needle guard on it. And the needles, what we've understood is everybody was accustomed pretty much to the Easy IO as far as something that drilled into the bone. There are other products out there, the bone injection gun and the Neo and so on, that actually impact the bone with the needle and force it in. But there was, the only other thing that really drilled into a bone were the hand products like the Jamshidi and the Cook, where you grab the needle and you just work it back and forth, and eventually you enter the medullary canal. So that's the concept. Squeeze, it rotates, and you just rotate it into the bone. It's more like a wood drill compared to a power drill.
Now,
which is important.
Sam, is this meant to be single use or multi-use? I mean, obviously the needle is.
Oh, it's multi-use. We have tested this out to 10,000. We call these actuations. Yeah. And the only reason we stopped, we actually went to 12,000, but at that point we stopped because we just got tired. Yeah. But the fact is, we don't know how many actuations this would actually give you. I don't know what that limit might be. It's pretty tough. I've run my 5,000-pound vehicle over this thing and then picked it up and drilled into a box. Yeah. The principle at our company is the same principle. Well, it was printed on all the ammunition boxes when I was in Vietnam. Every box had 0 defects. And one of the things that we pride ourselves at our company is producing bomb-proof products. Now that's the one thing. We want simple, elegant, and absolutely indestructible. And we weren't convinced at that point. We'd use this on many cadavers of different ages and so on, in all the different bones. So we were pretty certain about the strength of it, but still, we knew we were going to find out a whole load of stuff with lots of use and trials. And we didn't have that opportunity we couldn't get in front of anybody, Sam. I think you experienced the same thing with your new product. So, so what I found out was training is key with this product. it's a wonderful product. It has, but it has to be used properly. And the first thing is to understand how it has. We try to make it somewhat intuitive for people who've used the Easy IO, and many people have been using it for over 10 years, some 15 years. And so they're accustomed, you know, to a whole different thing. They're accustomed to the twist that's required on the Easy IO. They're not accustomed to this snap fit that we have here that I just did. I just snapped the needle in place. And they're accustomed to a power drill. So what we have to communicate to the people who want to have the advantages of a product that does not require any batteries is that to understand it's like a wood drill as opposed to a power drill. Now, how do you get purchase when you're drilling into some wood? The way I always did it was kind of work the handle back and forth till I got purchase, actually could see the end of the drill, and then you're comfortable, you know, drilling it in by hand. Maybe you've had that same experience. And so people who think this is a power drill, you just put that on there and it'll just go right in. You know, they may wiggle it around, and they have to understand they need to get purchased, treat it like it's a wood drill. It's a hand operated drill. And once they do it, of course, then it's locked in, and it's not a matter of force as much as it is a matter of speed. And once it's locked in, it's just the speed. You want to have steady pressure. You want to keep your hand in line so that, and I've got a variety of bones here, tibias, humeral head. And of course, your technique is kind of important. Maybe I could go through this skin portion, but I think it's more important for you to see what I'm doing. This is the simulated soft tissue. First thing I'll tell you is it has the same color coding as the Easy IO. There's a little 15 millimeter red marked catheter, and then there's a blue 25, which is this one, and then there's a yellow 45. So you shouldn't be confused about what needle to use. And it has the same little markings. Each one is 10 millimeters apart, except for the most proximal one, which is 5 millimeters. And these marks kind of give you a clue as to what needle to use and where you are. So if you push this, the idea is you push your needle down to the bone, whether it's in the tibia or the humerus or wherever you are, because you want it to touch the bone. If you touch the bone and you cannot see this last mark, then you're in a bad situation. What it kind of tells you is that that's probably not the right needle. Or if you push it in and this mark disappears, then again, the soft tissue is too thick because you haven't hit the bone yet, and this needle is gone. It means you don't have enough needle to hit the bone. So why you'd worry about hitting the bone and still not seeing this needle, this little last mark, is if you go too far in, you can hub the needle. If you hub the needle, you might be hitting the opposite cortex of the bone, and you wonder, why isn't the fluid flowing? It's because you hit the opposite cortex of the bone. So just a little point. So imagine I've gone through the soft tissue, and now I'm here, and then I get a little purchase. You can see me just working it to get a little purchase. I'm paying attention. I just go with speed, and when you get through the cortex, I can feel it. I don't know if you could see it. You almost saw it. Go see how much easier it goes. When you're drilling, hand drilling through bone, which I felt many times as an orthopedist, as you get right to through the cortex, just before you get through the cortex, it actually gets harder to turn that drill. You can actually feel it. That last turn, get through the inner cortex is harder. The bone's harder. And then when you feel it pop right in. And you have a great feel with this. I've drilled so many bones. Now, let me go, before I go there, if you want to remove something, remove this needle from the bone, then you just rotate it clockwise and pull. And of course, I would use a 10 cc, 10 millimeters syringe. I would want to take all risk away from me sticking myself. You'd connect this extension tube already primed with saline, and then you connect the extension tube to the catheter, and you can aspirate or inject. You confirm your location, and then we also have a stabilizer.
To be also clear about the things that you said, there's not a pediatric version of all of this, or adult, or this is you use this one thing for, and this works for your shoulder, for your tib fib, for kids, adults.
It's saying exactly. With kids, of course, you have the shoulder, the possibility, and the proximal tibia, distal tibia, but you also could use the distal femur. Adults, really, we don't have approval because that's not what our predicate, which was the EZ-IO. They didn't have that either. In essence, you insert it, you remove the stylet, you've already pre-primed the extension tubing, and then you can attach it. If you want, you can attach this, it's called the stabilizer, but it doesn't look like the other stabilizers. It's kind of big, and which might be annoying to some folks. But then you can apply this before you put the extension tubing or after. Either way.
I don't see why you say that might be annoying. What would be problematic about
here's
that?
The thing. People are adjusted. They're adjusted to what's on the market. You have the small little devices that connect to their needles. They refer to as a stabilizer. But in my mind, any needle in the bone is an impaled object. Why would you want to attach when you try and protect an impaled object? You don't attach anything to it in order to protect it. You build a little shield around it, do you not? To keep anything from hitting or catching on that impaled object. So in the case of, say, an EZ-IO or the other competitive shields, if you would, or stabilizers, they're all connected to their needles. So if anything hits it, it's going to jostle the IO device, the catheter that's in the bone. This has this cylinder, which very much works like an impaled object shield, so that when something hits this, it's not going to move the needle. So that's why we have
hit. I mean, what about somebody grabbing tubing and giving it a yank?
Yes, if that's a concern, like any other tubing, you can tape the tubing to the patient. So, so it's just, and if indeed you were, let's say, had a patient, it's rare that you'll get a patient, but not impossible, whose bone is so thick. Or you have patients whose bone is so hard, they have an abnormal condition. One of them, orthopedists have to deal with, because osteopetrosis. The bone is almost like stone, and you just can't drill through it. You won't put an EZ-IO through it either. But the most common occurrence to prevent drilling through a bone is you've just put it in the wrong spot. And where this is most likely to occur is in the tibia, because you key off the tibial tubercle. And the tibial tubercle is a wonderful key, but it's really thick. It's a couple centimeters down from the joint. It's that big prominence. And you want the ideal location, and you want to go medial, this big flat surface on the side of the tibia, a couple centimeters, a centimeter or two medial to this tibial tubercle. And again, it's going to be maybe a centimeter down. But the point is, you don't want to be toward the center, because that's some of the thickest bone in the tibia. And if you just, all it takes is being a half centimeter off, and suddenly you're trying to force this thing, whether you're using a EZ-IO, a bone injection gun, or a SAM IO, you're trying to drill it through the thickest bone. That's a mistake.
I noticed that you also sell that, the model that you're showing there. Is that right?
We do. We have a little training kit.
A trainer, right?
Trainer.
I think it's going to be orange, darling.
And we have and it's got this particular one I opened, has, you can get one bone. It had 3 bones. It had the, the distal tibia, complete with talus, and then the proximal tibia, and then the humeral head. And like everything else, we make our 80% of the products we actually make in our own factory. And I'm just much more comfortable because we can oversee and make sure that 0 defects is a real thing. Because there are a lot of little things on this.
So about 3 years ago, I started dabbling in CAD design.
Yeah.
And I now have a 3D printer. And
wonderful thing.
Like when I look at things like this, I see just a lot of complexity, the difficulty to build something like this, and the number of molds, the topic of manufacturability too. So you can build in your mind, you can build something that's wonderful with your 3D printer, but to make it manufacturable with an injection mold is a whole nother level of challenge. And
it
so,
is.
when I look at that product, I see just 100 times harder than anything I've ever tried to make. And
yeah, it's tricky business, but I think the main thing for people, if I had to impart something to them, is just to understand that this is not a power driver, that it is, and we didn't want to make a power driver. We wanted something that didn't have batteries, so the batteries could not fail. People sometimes look at this and they say, "Oh, that's lightweight. That's flimsy." But if you added the weight of the EZ-IO battery to this, it would weigh about the same as an EZ-IO. If you remove their battery, it would weigh about the same as ours. Also, it could be all you have is a single driver and there's multiple casualties. Maybe you have 2 drivers, but there's 6 casualties and you need to have an IO in all of them. It means you can take the IO needle, and just as you used to do in the old days with a jamshidi or a cook, you can just twist this thing in, rock it back and forth, and go right in, just as they did all the years before they had, a power IO or a drill IO or an impact like the Big or the Neo. So that's another, I think, a neat little aspect of this, which we tried intentionally to create.